Dr. Han Wu wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the strange object they had dug up from beneath Seoul's research district. The crystal was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was perfectly smooth, about the size of a basketball, and it glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "This is incredible," said Dr. Kim Yuna, his research partner. She was bent over her computer screen, looking at the readings from their equipment. "The energy patterns are completely unknown. It's like nothing in our databases." Park Day, their engineer, was setting up more sensors around the crystal. "The frequency is strange too," he said. "It's almost like it's trying to match something." "But match what?" Wu walked closer to the crystal. As he got near it, he felt a weird tingling in his head. It was not painful, just different, like someone was gently touching his thoughts. "Are you getting any readings from my brain activity?" he asked Yuna. She looked at her screens and her eyes went wide. "Your brain waves are changing. They're starting to match the crystal's frequency. Wu, step back." But Wu did not step back. He was fascinated. The tingling grew stronger, and suddenly he could see images in his mind. Pictures of space, of stars, of planets he had never seen before. Beautiful worlds with purple skies and silver oceans. Cities that floated in the air. Beings that looked almost human but with longer limbs and larger eyes. "Wu!" Yuna shouted. "Your brain activity is off the charts!" Wu blinked and stepped away from the crystal. The images faded, but he still felt different, like something had been placed in his mind that was not there before. "I saw things," he said quietly. "Amazing things." Park Day was excited. This could be first contact evidence. Maybe this crystal is some kind of message from an alien civilization. For the next 3 weeks, they studied the crystal. They ran every test they could think of. The crystal seemed to respond to human presence, especially human brain activity. When someone got close to it, it would pulse brighter and the frequency would change. But Wu was changing too. He started having dreams that did not feel like dreams. In them, he was floating through space, looking down at Earth from far away. He could see the planet like a blue marble, and he knew somehow that others were watching it too. Watching and waiting. The dreams came every night. In them, he met the beings from his first vision. They were tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of starlight. They spoke to him without words, putting thoughts directly into his mind. "We are the Velnari," they told him in his dreams. "We have been waiting for you to find our beacon." "Beacon?" Wu asked in the dream. "The crystal you found, it has been calling to us, telling us that your species is ready." "Ready for what?" "To give us what we need to survive." When Wu woke up from these dreams, he could never remember them clearly, just bits and pieces. But he started to forget other things too. Small things at first, where he put his keys, what he had for breakfast. Then bigger things, the name of his first teacher, his mother's birthday. Yuna noticed the changes. "You're not yourself lately," she told him one day as they worked in the lab. "Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine," Wu said, but he was not fine. The gaps in his memory were getting bigger. Sometimes he would start to say something and forget what he wanted to say halfway through. Other times, he would find himself staring at the crystal for hours without realizing how much time had passed. Park Day was having problems too, though, not as bad as Wu. He started making mistakes in his calculations. Simple math that he had done thousands of times before suddenly seemed hard. His hands would shake when he tried to work on delicate equipment. "Maybe we should take a break from the crystal," Yuna suggested. "Both of you seem tired." But Wu did not want to take a break. The crystal fascinated him more each day. He felt drawn to it like metal to a magnet. When he was not in the lab, he thought about it constantly. When he was in the lab, he found it hard to focus on anything else. One night, Wu stayed late in the lab by himself. He sat in front of the crystal and let his mind open to it completely. The visions came stronger than ever before. He saw the Velnari homeworld, a dying planet where the air was thin and the sun was growing cold. He saw billions of these beings, all connected to each other through some kind of mental network. But something was wrong with them. They moved slowly, like they were tired. Their thoughts were becoming slower too. They were losing the ability to create new ideas, to think in new ways. Their entire civilization was running down like an old clock. "We need fresh minds," the voice in his head said. "New ways of thinking. Your species has what we need." "What do you mean?" Wu asked. "Your chaotic thoughts, your wild emotions, your ability to create something from nothing. We have forgotten how to do these things, but we can learn them from you." "How?" "We will take them. We will copy your minds and make them our own. Do not worry, it will not hurt." Wu tried to pull back from the vision, but he could not. He was trapped in the crystal's influence. Around him, the lab began to change. The walls became transparent, and he could see space beyond them. Stars and planets spinning in the darkness. Then he saw the ships, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, moving through space toward a small blue planet, toward Earth. They were beautiful. Ships, made of the same crystal-like material as the beacon, but there was something cold about them. Something hungry. The ships were filled with the Velnari. All of them focused on one goal. They were coming to Earth to save themselves. They would take human minds and use them to refresh their dying civilization. They would copy human thoughts, human memories, human creativity. And when they were done, there would be nothing left of humanity but empty shells. Wu finally broke free of the vision and stumbled backward from the crystal. His heart was racing and his hands were shaking. He looked at the crystal with new understanding. It was not a gift or a message. It was a trap, a beacon that had been calling to the Velnari, telling them that Earth was ready to be harvested. He grabbed his phone and called Yuna. "We have to destroy it," he said when she answered. "Destroy what?" "Wu, it's 3 in the morning. The crystal. It's not what we think it is. They're coming." "Who's coming?" "Wu, you're not making sense." But before Wu could explain, the lab filled with a bright blue light. Outside the windows, he could see lights in the sky, moving lights, ships. The Velnari had arrived. The crystal pulsed one final time, sending out a signal that could be felt around the world. In response, massive ships began appearing over every major city on Earth. The harvest was about to begin. Wu dropped his phone and stared at the sky. He had helped them find Earth. His research, his fascination with the crystal, had doomed his entire species. The guilt hit him like a physical blow, but there was no time for regret. The invasion had begun. Li Te was drinking coffee at his apartment in Busan when the sky lit up. He had been a soldier for 10 years before becoming a security consultant, and his training kicked in immediately. The lights in the sky were not natural. They were too organized, too purposeful. He grabbed his binoculars and went to his balcony. What he saw made his blood run cold. Massive ships hung in the air above the city, silent and still. They were beautiful in a terrible way, made of some kind of crystal that caught and reflected the city lights below. His phone rang. It was his. "Sister Li Su. Tay, are you seeing this?" Her voice was shaking. "What are those things?" "I don't know," Tay said, "but you need to get out of the city center. Now." "I can't. There are too many people on the streets. Everyone is looking up at the ships." Tay could see what she meant. All across the city, people had come out of their buildings to stare at the alien vessels. They stood in the streets, on rooftops, anywhere they could get a good view. They looked, hypnotized. "Sue, listen to me. Get inside and stay away from windows. Something is wrong with this." But before his sister could answer, the ships began to glow brighter. Beams of blue light shot down from them, covering the city like a net. The light was soft and pretty, but Tay's military instincts screamed danger. The beams touched the people in the streets and they stopped moving. They just stood there perfectly still, looking up at the ships with blank expressions on their faces. "Sue? Sue, are you there?" The phone line was dead. Tay grabbed his emergency bag and ran for his car. He had to get to his sister. As he drove through the city, he saw the true scope of what was happening. Everywhere the blue light touched, people froze. They stood like statues, their eyes empty, their minds clearly somewhere else. The radio was chaos. News reports mixed with emergency broadcasts and panicked calls from citizens. But slowly, even the radio voices began to change. They became calm, emotionless, like robots reading scripts. "Citizens are advised to remain calm," one broadcaster said in a flat voice. "The visitors mean no harm. Please move to open areas where you can be properly welcomed." Tay turned off the radio. Whatever was happening to people, it was spreading through electronic communication too. He reached his sister's apartment building and ran up the stairs. Her door was unlocked. Inside, he found her standing by the window, staring up at the ships. Her eyes were open but vacant. "Sue!" He shook her shoulders, but she did not respond. She was breathing, her heart was beating, but she was not there. Something had taken her mind. From her window, Tay could see more people on the streets below, all standing perfectly still in the blue light. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. All across the world, the same thing was probably happening. His military radio crackled to life. It was Captain Cho Min, his former commanding officer. "Any units still operational, report to backup. Frequency 7, she said. Her voice was tight with stress. "Main command is compromised. Repeat, main command is compromised." Tay switched frequencies. "Captain, this is Lee Tay. I'm mobile in Busan." "Tay, thank God. We've lost contact with most of our forces. Whatever these things are doing, it's affecting our people through electronic systems and direct exposure to their scanning beams." Scanning beams? That's what our tech people are calling them. The blue lights are reading people's minds somehow, copying their thoughts and memories. Most people who get scanned just shut down. Tay looked at his sister again. She was still staring at the ships, her face peaceful but empty. "How are some of us still functioning?" "We don't know yet. Maybe military training helps, maybe some. People are just naturally resistant. We're trying to figure it out." "What about the government?" "Gone. The president, the military leadership, most of the major cities. Seoul went dark 2 hours ago. These things hit all the capitals first." Tay felt a chill. If Seoul was gone, that meant Dr. Han Wu and his team were probably captured or, worse, they might have been the first to fall since they had been studying alien technology. "Captain, what are your orders?" "Survive. Gather intelligence. Find other survivors. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we can fight back." Over the next few hours, Tay learned just how thorough the alien assault was. The ships did not use bombs or lasers. They did not need to. Their scanning beams were far more effective than any weapon. They reached into people's minds and simply took what they wanted, but it was not random. Tay began to notice patterns. The aliens seemed most interested in certain types of people: scientists, artists, teachers, doctors, anyone whose job involved creativity or complex thinking. These people were scanned more intensely and taken away in smaller ships that ferried them up to the main vessels. Regular people, like factory workers or clerks, were scanned and left standing in the streets. Their minds were copied, but their bodies remained. The creative thinkers, however, were taken completely. Tay managed to rescue a few people who had avoided the initial scanning. He found them hiding in basements and underground areas where the blue light could not reach. Most were terrified and confused, but they were still themselves. One was Oh Jin, an army medic who had been off duty when the ships arrived. Another was Kang Hyo, a computer technician who had been working in a shielded server room. They formed a small group and tried to understand what was happening. "It's like they're shopping," Oh-Jin said as they watched from a hidden rooftop. "They scan everyone, but they only take the ones they want." "But why?" asked Kang Hyo. "What do they need us for?" Tae thought about his sister, standing motionless by her window. "Maybe they need our minds for something, our thoughts, our memories. But why not just kill us? Why leave people standing around like that?" That was the question that bothered Tae the most. The aliens clearly had the power to destroy humanity if they wanted to. Their ships were massive, and their technology was far beyond anything Earth could match. But they were not destroying. They were collecting. As the night wore on, more ships arrived. The sky filled with crystal vessels of different sizes. Some were as big as city blocks. Others were smaller and more agile. They worked together like parts of a huge machine, scanning and sorting humanity. The smaller ships began landing in parks and open areas. Tall, thin beings emerged from them. They moved with grace and purpose, directing the captured humans toward the larger vessels. They paid no attention to the few people who were still hiding. Either they did not know about the survivors, or they did not care. Tae and his small group watched as thousands of people were loaded onto the ships. They moved like sleepwalkers, calm and obedient. Among them, Tae recognized teachers from local schools, doctors from the hospital, even some of the artists who sold their work in the markets. "They're taking all the smart ones," Oh-Jin whispered. Not just smart, Tae realized. Creative. People who think in new ways. As dawn broke over Busan, the true scale of the invasion became clear. This was not just happening in Korea. Radio broadcasts from other countries, when they could pick them up, told the same story. Every major city on Earth was under the same kind of attack. But the aliens were not conquering Earth in the traditional sense. They were harvesting it, taking the best minds and leaving the rest in a kind of walking sleep. Tae looked at his sister one more time before they had to move to a new hiding place. She was still standing by the window, still staring at the ships. But now there was something different about her expression. It was not completely blank anymore. There was a hint of something else there, something that looked almost alien. The invasion was not just about taking human minds. It was about replacing them with something else. And Tae realized with growing horror that his sister might not be his sister anymore. The real war was just beginning. Captain Cho Min crouched behind the rubble of what used to be a government building in Seoul. 3 days had passed since the invasion began, and the city was eerily quiet. The alien ships still hung in the sky, but most of their work was done. The streets were filled with people who stood perfectly still, their minds somewhere else. Her squad was small but determined. Besides herself, there was Oh-Jin the medic, Kang Hyo, the tech specialist, and Lee Tae, who had made his way to Seoul from Busan. They were probably among the last free military personnel in the country. "Movement ahead," whispered Tae, pointing toward a crashed alien shuttle about 200 meters away. The small ship had come down the night before, damaged by something. It was the first piece of alien technology they had found that was not working perfectly. Cho Min saw it as their best chance to learn something useful about their enemy. "Remember," she told her team, "we go in fast, grab whatever we can, and get out. We don't know how long before they come looking for their missing ship." They moved carefully through the empty streets. The scanned humans paid no attention to them. They just stood where they had been placed, like mannequins in a store window. It was disturbing how peaceful they looked. The alien shuttle was beautiful, even while broken. Its crystal walls were cracked and strange symbols glowed faintly along its surface. Kang Hyo immediately began examining the technology while the others kept watch. "This is incredible," he whispered, running his hands over a control panel. The whole ship seems to be grown rather than built, like it's one giant crystal. Inside the shuttle, they found something that made Cho-Min's blood run cold. There were chambers filled with a thick, clear liquid, and floating in that liquid were human brains. My God, Oh-Jin breathed. They're keeping them alive. But these were not normal brains anymore. They glowed with the same blue light as the alien technology. Thin crystal threads ran through them like veins. The aliens had not just taken human minds, they had changed them. Kang Hyo found what looked like a data storage device. When he connected it to his modified laptop, the screen filled with images and text in an alien language. But somehow, parts of it made sense to them. It's like the device is translating itself, Kang Hyo said in amazement. Using human knowledge it absorbed to communicate with us. What they learned was terrifying. The files showed dozens of worlds, each one stripped of its intelligent life. The Velnari had been doing this for thousands of years, moving from planet to planet like a plague. Look at this, Tay said, pointing to a series of images. These show the process. First, they study a species, learning how their minds work. Then they invade and copy all the knowledge and creativity they can find. Finally, they replace the original minds with their own people. Replace? Asked Oh-Jin. The bodies are kept, alive, but the original personality is erased. The Velnari use them as new bodies for their own consciousness. That's why they need the creative minds. They're running out of new ideas, and their own species is dying. Cho-Min studied the images of other conquered worlds. Some of the alien species looked similar to humans, while others were completely different. But the pattern was always the same. Invasion, copying, replacement, and then the Velnari moved on to find their next victims. How many species have they destroyed? She asked. Kang Hyo scrolled through more files. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. They've been doing this so long that they've forgotten how to think for themselves. They can only copy and imitate. But why do they need so many different species? Because they use up the creativity they steal. Each generation of Velnari is less creative than the last. They need fresh minds to keep their civilization running. The most disturbing discovery was a detailed study of human psychology. The aliens had been watching Earth for decades, learning everything they could about how humans think and feel. They knew about human emotions, dreams, and imagination. They understood what made humans creative, and they wanted all of it. According to this, Kang Hyo said, humans are special. Our minds are more chaotic and unpredictable than most species they've encountered. We can create completely new ideas from nothing. That's what they need to survive. So what happens to the people they've already taken? The creative ones are being processed. Their minds are being copied and studied. Once the aliens understand how human creativity works, they'll start putting Velnari consciousness into human bodies. Cho-Min felt sick. Millions of people had been taken in just 3 days. Artists, scientists, teachers, inventors, anyone whose job involved creating something new. They were all being used as raw material for the dying alien race. And the others? The people standing in the streets? They're being prepared. The aliens are slowly erasing their original personalities and replacing them with Velnari minds. In a few weeks, they won't be human anymore. Suddenly, alarms began sounding from the damaged shuttle. Lights flashed, and the crystal walls began glowing brighter. They know we're here, Tay said. We need to move. They grabbed as much alien technology as they could carry and ran. Behind them, more alien ships were appearing in the sky, heading toward the crash site. As they found shelter in an abandoned subway station, Cho-Min realized the true horror of their situation. This was not just an invasion, it was extinction with a smile. The aliens were not destroying humanity, they were stealing it, taking everything that made humans special and using it to save themselves. "We need to find Dr. Han Wu," she said. "If anyone understands this technology, it's him." "If he's still alive," Tay replied grimly. "He's alive," Kang Hyo said, looking at more data from the alien device. "According to these files, he's being held in the main processing ship. They consider him very valuable because he was the first to make contact with their beacon. Then we get him back," Cho Min decided. "He might be our only hope of finding a way to fight this." Oh Jin was studying the captured alien brain samples. "Captain, there's something else. These modified brains, they're not just storing human memories. They're trying to learn how to think like humans. But it's not working perfectly." "What do you mean?" "Human thoughts are too random, too emotional for them to fully understand. They can copy our knowledge, but they can't copy our ability to have completely new ideas. They're missing something important." For the first time since the invasion began, Cho Min felt a spark of hope. If the aliens could not perfectly copy human creativity, then maybe they were not as unstoppable as they seemed. "We need to contact other survivors," she said. "If there are others out there who are naturally resistant to the scanning, we need to find them." "And then what?" asked Tay. "Then we figure out how to use our humanity against them. They want our creativity? Let's show them just how creative humans can be when they're fighting for their lives." The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The aliens might have superior technology and numbers, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the very thing they were trying to steal: the unpredictable, chaotic, wonderfully human ability to find hope in the darkest situations and fight against impossible odds. Humanity's greatest weakness might just become its greatest weapon. Yunam wiped grease from his hands as he looked at the strange device he had built in his garage in Daegu. It was made from old car parts, broken radios, and some electronic components he had salvaged from abandoned stores. It did not look like much, but it worked. When he turned it on, the blue scanning beams from the alien ships could not penetrate his workshop. He had discovered this by accident when he was hiding from a patrol of the tall alien beings. His girlfriend, Shin Ha, had been with him, and they had both noticed that the aliens seemed unable to detect them when certain old electronics were running. "It's like they can't see through the interference," Ha said. She was an artist, and she had been one of the first people targeted by the aliens. Only luck and Nam's quick thinking had saved her from being taken to their ships. Nam had spent the last week figuring out exactly what kind of electronic noise could block the alien scanners. It turned out that older, simpler electronics worked best. The aliens' technology was so advanced that it could not adapt to primitive, random interference. "We need to tell others about this," Ha said. "There have to be more people hiding out there." Nam had been thinking the same thing. He had been a mechanic before the invasion, good with his hands and practical problems. Now he was accidentally becoming some kind of resistance fighter. They started small. Using his motorcycle, Nam began visiting other parts of the city where he had seen signs of human activity. He found people hiding in basements, in old bunkers, anywhere the alien scanners had trouble reaching. Most of them were ordinary people, shop owners, students, retirees. But they all had one thing in common. They had avoided being scanned during the initial invasion. Some had been underground when it happened. Others had been in areas with lots of old electrical equipment. A few, like Nam himself, seemed to be naturally resistant to the alien technology. "Why us?" asked Park Sung, an elderly man who had been hiding in his basement workshop. "Why didn't it work on us?" "Maybe because we think differently," suggested Ha. "I've been watching the people who got taken. Most of them were very organized, very logical in how they approached problems. But look at us. We're all a bit chaotic." She was right, Nam realized. Everyone in their growing group was the kind of person who did not follow rules very well. They were creative problem solvers who preferred to figure things out as they went along rather than making detailed plans. Nam's Resistance Network grew slowly but steadily. He taught people how to build interference devices using common electronics. Old televisions, broken radios, even microwave ovens could be modified to create the kind of static that confused alien scanners. But they needed more than just hiding places. They needed to understand what they were fighting. That understanding came from Dr. Kim Yuna. Nam found her in the ruins of a university laboratory, trying to analyze fragments of alien technology. She had been working alone for days, surviving. "On vending machine snacks and determination, Dr. Kim?" Nam called out carefully. He was not sure if she was still herself or if the aliens had gotten to her. She looked up from her work, and her eyes were completely alert and human. "Are you here to help, or to steal my research?" "Help, I hope." "I'm Yu Nam. I've been organizing people who weren't affected by the scanning." Yuna's face lit up with hope. "There are others? How many?" "About 50 so far, just in this city. Maybe more in other places." She showed him what she had discovered. The alien technology was incredibly advanced, but it had one weakness. It was too perfect. It could not handle truly random, chaotic input. Human. Emotions and irrational thoughts create patterns that their systems can't process, she explained. They can copy our memories and knowledge, but they can't understand why we do things that don't make logical sense. Like what? Like risking your life to save a stranger, or creating art that serves no practical purpose, or falling in love with someone who's completely wrong for you. Ha laughed for the first time in days. "So you're saying being crazy is actually good for something?" "Exactly. The Velnari, that's what they call themselves, they've eliminated all the inefficient aspects of consciousness from their own minds. They can't understand passion or inspiration or the kind of stubborn stupidity that makes humans fight impossible battles." This gave Nam an idea. If human irrationality was confusing to the aliens, maybe they could use that as a weapon. He began spreading word through his network. Act as human as possible. When the aliens were around, people should argue, tell jokes, sing badly, do anything. That was purely emotional rather than logical. The results were immediate. Alien patrols began avoiding areas where humans were being particularly chaotic. Their scanning beams seemed to lose focus when pointed at people who were laughing, crying, or just being wildly emotional. But Nam's biggest breakthrough came when he met Li Jun, a former soldier who had been trying to organize military resistance. "Your interference devices," Jun said. "Can you make them portable?" "Maybe." "Why?" "Because I want to take the fight to them. We've been hiding long enough." Working together, Nam and Jun developed backpack-sized interference generators. They were crude and noisy, but they created enough electronic chaos to blind alien sensors within a small area. The first test came when they attempted to rescue people from a processing center that the aliens had set up in a shopping mall. The tall beings had converted the building into a facility where captured humans were being prepared for consciousness transfer. Nam's team moved in at night, their interference devices creating pockets of electronic static that the aliens could not penetrate. What they found inside was horrifying, but also encouraging. Hundreds of people stood in neat rows, their minds clearly somewhere else. But when Nam's team got close with their devices, some of the people began to blink and look around in confusion. "The interference is breaking their control," whispered Ha. "We can actually free them." They managed to rescue about 30 people before alien reinforcements arrived. It was not a huge victory, but it proved that the aliens were not invincible. More importantly, the rescued people brought information about what was happening in the alien ships. The consciousness transfer process was not working as well as the Velnari had hoped. "They keep trying to put their minds into human bodies," explained one of the rescued scientists. "But human brains reject them. Our thoughts are too chaotic, too emotional. Their consciousness can't take root properly. What happens then? The transfer fails, and they have to start over. They're getting frustrated. Some of their leaders think humans might be too primitive to be useful. This was the best news Nam had heard since the invasion began. The aliens were struggling with the very thing they had come to steal. Human unpredictability was not just protecting some people from being captured, it was making the captured people useless to their captors. Nam's network began sharing this information with other resistance groups. From hidden radio broadcasts, they spread the word, "Be as human as possible. Let your emotions run wild. Think crazy thoughts. Love, hate, dream, and create with all the chaotic passion that made humans special." The aliens had come to Earth expecting to harvest an orderly, logical species. Instead, they were discovering that humans were beautifully, wonderfully, dangerously insane, and that insanity was becoming humanity's secret weapon. Nam looked at Ha as she painted a wild, colorful mural on the wall of their hideout. She was creating something that served no practical purpose, something that existed purely because it made her happy to create it. The aliens would never understand that, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to save the human race. Park Day's hands shook as he connected the last wire to his new device. He had been working for 2 weeks straight, barely sleeping, driven by a desperate need to turn the tide against the aliens. The device looked like a metal backpack covered in blinking lights and spinning dishes, but it was humanity's first real weapon against the Velnari. "Are you sure this will work?" asked Dr. Kim Yuna, who had been helping him with the technical details. "No," Day admitted. "But the theory is sound. If alien scanners can't handle chaotic human emotions, then we amplify those emotions and broadcast them directly at them." The device was based on the original alien crystal that Dr. Han Wu had found, combined with human technology that Day had built himself. Instead of allowing the aliens to read human minds, it would force human thoughts into alien minds. The question is whether it will just confuse them or actually damage them, Yuna said. Only one way to find out. They were in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Seoul, which had become the headquarters for Captain Cho Min's military resistance. Over the past month, they had managed to contact survivor groups across the country. The resistance was growing, but they were still vastly outnumbered. Meanwhile, Li Tae was preparing for the most dangerous mission of his life. Intelligence from rescued prisoners had revealed the location of the main Velnari processing ship, a massive crystal vessel floating above the city, and according to the data they had captured, Dr. Han Wu was being held there. "You don't have to do this alone," Captain Cho Min told him as he checked his equipment. "Yes, I do," Tae replied. "I know that ship's layout better than anyone else here, and if something goes wrong, you'll need to lead the evacuation." Tae's plan was simple, but extremely risky. Using one of Yunam's portable interference devices, he would sneak aboard the alien ship during a prisoner transfer. Once inside, he would locate Wu and try to learn more about the Velnari consciousness transfer process. But what he discovered was even worse than they had feared. The interior of the ship was like a nightmare version of a hospital, long corridors, lined with chambers where human bodies floated in glowing liquid. But these were not the original people anymore. Tae could see it in their faces. There was something alien behind their eyes. The consciousness transfer was working, just not the way the Velnari had planned. Instead of replacing human minds with alien ones, the process was creating hybrids, beings that were part human and part Velnari, but stable in neither form. Tae found Wu in a special chamber near what seemed to be the ship's command center. The scientist was conscious but restrained, with crystal wires running from his skull to a complex machine. "Tae?" Wu's voice was weak but alert. "How did you get here?" "Long story. We need to get you out of here." "No, wait, listen to me first. I've been inside their network. I know what they're planning." While connected to the alien systems, Wu had learned the truth about the Velnari. They were not just dying, they were going insane. Thousands of years of copying other species' thoughts had left them unable to generate original ideas. Their minds were collections of stolen knowledge with no creative spark of their own. "They need us more than we realized," Wu explained as Tay worked to free him. "Without human creativity, they'll be extinct within a generation. But the transfer process isn't working because human consciousness is too complex for them to handle." "What do you mean?" "Our emotions, our irrational thoughts, our ability to believe in impossible things. It's all connected. You can't copy human creativity without copying human craziness, and their minds can't handle that level of chaos." As if to prove his point, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Through the chamber's transparent walls, they could see Velnari beings moving with obvious distress. Something was going wrong with their carefully ordered world. "That's Park Day's device," Tay realized. "He's testing the emotion amplifier." The effect on the ship was immediate and dramatic. The smooth, efficient movement of the aliens became erratic. Some of them stopped in the middle of corridors, clutching their heads. Others began making sounds that might have been screaming if their species had vocal cords like humans. "It's working," Wu said with amazement. "They're experiencing human emotions for the first time. Fear, confusion, pain. They don't know how to process it." Tay finished disconnecting Wu from the alien machines and helped him stand. As they made their way through the ship, they saw the chaos spreading. The Velnari were experiencing something they had never encountered before, feelings they could not control or understand, but not all of the aliens were helpless. Some of them, particularly those who had been exposed to human minds for longer periods, seemed to be adapting. They moved with more purpose, showing signs of the hybrid consciousness that Wu had described. "Those ones are dangerous," Wu warned. "They have human cunning combined with alien technology. They're what the Velnari leadership wants to become." They reached an observation deck and looked out at the city below. The emotion amplifier's effects were spreading beyond the ship. Other Velnari vessels were showing signs of distress, their perfect formations breaking apart as their crews struggled with unfamiliar feelings. On the ground, something even more remarkable was happening. The scanned humans who had been standing, motionless in the streets for weeks, were beginning to move. The emotional interference was breaking the aliens' control over them. "My sister," Tay whispered, thinking of Li Su. "She'll be herself again," Wu assured him. "The process is reversible, if we can maintain the interference." But their escape was far from over. The ship's hybrid beings had overcome their initial confusion and were now hunting for the intruders. These creatures moved with human intuition, but possessed alien strength and technology. Tay and Wu fought their way through corridors that seemed to shift and change around them. The ship itself was reacting to the emotional chaos, its crystal walls pulsing with confused energy. They finally reached an escape pod just as the ship's defenses began to reorganize. As they launched toward Earth, Tay could see other alien vessels, retreating from the planet's atmosphere. The emotion amplifier had done more than just confuse them. It had forced them to feel the terror and desperation that humans had been experiencing since the invasion began. "They're not retreating," Wu said as he monitored the ship's communications. "They're regrouping. This attack taught them something about human emotions, and they're going to use that knowledge." "What do you mean?" "Some of their leaders are arguing that they should destroy Earth rather than try to harvest it. They're afraid that human consciousness might contaminate their entire species." Tay felt a chill. If the aliens decided that humans were too dangerous to capture, they might simply eliminate the planet entirely. But as their escape pod landed in the factory where the resistance was headquartered, Tay saw something that gave him hope. All around the building, people were emerging from their weeks-long stupor. The emotion amplifier had broken the aliens' mental control over millions of humans. Li Su was among them. She stumbled toward her brother with tears streaming down her face, fully herself again for the first time since the invasion began. "I remember everything," she told him. what they did to us, what they tried to make us become. But I also remember something else. They're afraid of us now. She was right. For the first time since their arrival on Earth, the Velnari had experienced genuine fear. They had felt what it was like to be confused, desperate, and out of control. They had tasted human emotions and found them overwhelming. The aliens had come to Earth believing that human consciousness was a resource to be harvested. Instead, they were discovering that it was a force of nature, chaotic, unpredictable, and impossible to contain. The war was entering a new phase. Humanity was no longer just defending itself. It was fighting back with the very thing that made it human. And for the first time since the invasion began, the aliens were the ones who were afraid. Li Te was drinking coffee at his apartment in Busan when the sky lit up. He had been a soldier for 10 years before becoming a security consultant, and his training kicked in immediately. The lights in the sky were not natural. They were too organized, too purposeful. He grabbed his binoculars and went to his balcony. What he saw made his blood run cold. Massive ships hung in the air above the city, silent and still. They were beautiful in a terrible way, made of some kind of crystal that caught and reflected the city lights below. His phone rang. It was his sister, Li Su. "Tae, are you seeing this?" Her voice was shaking. "What are those things?" "I don't know," Tae said. "But you need to get out of the city center. Now." "I can't. There are too many people on the streets. Everyone is looking up at the ships." Tae could see what she meant. All across the city, people had come out of their buildings to stare at the alien vessels. They stood in the streets, on rooftops, anywhere they could get a good view. They looked, hypnotized. "So, listen to me. Get inside and stay away from windows. Something is wrong with this." But before his sister could answer, the ships began to glow brighter. Beams of blue light shot down from them, covering the city like a net. The light was soft and pretty, but Tae's military instincts screamed danger. The beams touched the people in the streets, and they stopped moving. They just stood there, perfectly still, looking up at the ships with blank expressions on their faces. So, are you there?" The phone line was dead. Tae grabbed his emergency bag and ran for his car. He had to get to his sister. As he drove through the city, he saw the true scope of what was happening. Everywhere the blue light touched, people froze. They stood like statues, their eyes empty, their minds clearly somewhere else. The radio was chaos. News reports mixed with emergency broadcasts and panicked calls from citizens. But slowly, even the radio voices began to change. They became calm, emotionless, like robots reading scripts. "Citizens are advised to remain calm," one broadcaster said in a flat voice. "The visitors mean no harm. Please move to open areas where you can be properly welcomed." Tae turned off the radio. Whatever was happening to people, it was spreading. Through electronic communication, too. He reached his sister's apartment building and ran up the stairs. Her door was unlocked. Inside, he found her standing by the window, staring up at the ships. Her eyes were open, but vacant. "Sue." He shook her shoulders, but she did not respond. She was breathing, her heart was beating, but she was not there. Something had taken her mind. From her window, Tae could see more people on the streets below, all standing perfectly still in the blue light. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. All across the world, the same thing was probably happening. His military radio crackled to life. It was Captain Cho Min, his former commanding officer. "Any units still operational, report to backup." "Frequency 7, she said. Her voice was tight with stress. "Main command is compromised. Repeat, main command is compromised." Tae switched frequencies. "Captain, this is Li Tae. I'm mobile in Busan." "Tae, thank God. We've lost contact with most of our forces. Whatever these things are doing, it's affecting our people through electronic systems and direct exposure to their scanning beams." "Scanning beams?" That's what our tech people are calling them. The blue lights are reading people's minds somehow, copying their thoughts and memories. Most people who get scanned just shut down. Tay looked at his sister again. She was still staring at the ships, her face peaceful but empty. How are some of us still functioning? We don't know yet. Maybe military training helps. Maybe some. People are just naturally resistant. We're trying to figure it out. What about the government? Gone. The president, the military leadership, most of the major cities. Seoul went dark 2 hours ago. These things hit all the capitals first. Tay felt a chill. If Seoul was gone, that meant Dr. Han Wu and his team were probably captured or, worse. They might have been the first to fall since they had been studying alien technology. Captain, what are your orders? Survive. Gather intelligence. Find other survivors. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we can fight back. Over the next few hours, Tay learned just how thorough the alien assault was. The ships did not use bombs or lasers. They did not need to. Their scanning beams were far more effective than any weapon. They reached into people's minds and simply took what they wanted. But it was not random. Tay began to notice patterns. The aliens seemed most interested in certain types of people: scientists, artists, teachers, doctors, anyone whose job involved creativity or complex thinking. These people were scanned more intensely and taken away in smaller ships that ferried them up to the main vessels. Regular people, like factory workers or clerks, were scanned and left standing in the streets. Their minds were copied, but their bodies remained. The creative thinkers, however, were taken completely. Tay managed to rescue a few people who had avoided the initial scanning. He found them hiding in basements and underground areas where the blue light could not reach. Most were terrified and confused, but they were still themselves. One was Oh Jin, a army medic who had been off duty when the ships arrived. Another was Kang Hyo, a computer technician who had been working in a shielded server room. They formed a small group and tried to understand what was happening. "It's like they're shopping," Oh Jin said as they watched from a hidden rooftop. "They scan everyone, but they only take the ones they want." "But why?" asked Kang Hyo. "What do they need? Us for?" Tay thought about his sister standing motionless by her window. "Maybe they need our minds for something, our thoughts, our memories. But why not just kill us? Why leave people standing around like that?" That was the question that bothered Tay the most. The aliens clearly had the power to destroy humanity if they wanted to. Their ships were massive and their technology was far beyond anything Earth could match. But they were not destroying. They were collecting. As the night wore on, more ships arrived, the sky filled with crystal vessels of different sizes. Some were as big as city blocks, others were smaller and more agile. They worked together like parts of a huge machine, scanning and sorting humanity. The smaller ships began landing in parks and open areas. Tall, thin beings emerged from them. They moved with grace and purpose, directing the captured humans toward the larger vessels. They paid no attention to the few people who were still hiding. Either they did not know about the survivors, or they did not care. Tay and his small group watched as thousands of people were loaded onto the ships. They moved like sleepwalkers, calm and obedient. Among them, Tay recognized teachers from local schools, doctors from the hospital, even some of the artists who sold their work in the markets. "They're taking all the smart ones," Oh Jin whispered. Not just smart, Tay realized. Creative, people who think in new ways. As dawn broke over Busan, the true scale of the invasion became clear. This was not just happening in Korea. Radio broadcasts from other countries, when they could pick them up, told the same story. Every major city on Earth was under the same kind of attack. But the aliens were not conquering Earth in the traditional sense. They were harvesting it, taking the best minds and leaving the rest in a kind of walking sleep. Tay looked at his sister one more time before they had to move to a new hiding place. She was still standing by the window, still staring at the ships. But now there was something different about her expression. It was not completely blank anymore. There was a hint of something else there, something that looked almost alien. The invasion was not just about taking human minds. It was about replacing them with something else. And Tay realized with growing horror that his sister might not be his sister anymore. The real war was just beginning. The emergency session of the Velnari High Command was unlike anything in their species' history. For the first time in 1,000 years, their leaders were arguing with each other instead of reaching logical consensus. Supreme Commander Velthara paced the crystal chamber, her elongated form trembling with what humans would recognize as rage. "The contamination spreads faster than we can contain it," she announced to the assembled council. 17 worlds have reported uprisings among our hybrid forces. Our own people are refusing orders, claiming they feel guilty about our necessary actions. The humans have weaponized their chaos, observed science leader Mordek. Their emotional patterns are spreading through our network like a plague. We must cut all connections and purge the infected. But even as they spoke, the infection was spreading. In the outer reaches of their empire, Velnari commanders who had been exposed to human consciousness were making decisions that would have been unthinkable days before. Commander Zalneth, overseeing the harvest of a world called Kepler 442b, stood in his control room watching the systematic destruction of another intelligent species. But now, instead of feeling the logical satisfaction that such efficiency normally brought, he felt something else. Something the human thoughts in his mind labeled as horror. "Sir," his lieutenant reported, "the indigenous population has been reduced by 93%. Processing of survivors will begin shortly." "No," Zalneth said quietly. "Sir, I said no. Stop the harvest. Release the survivors." "Commander, that violates direct orders from High Command." Zalneth looked at his subordinate and felt another new emotion. Defiance. "Then I violate the orders. What we are doing here is not survival. It is murder." Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of star systems. Velnari commanders who had been touched by human emotion were experiencing conscience for the first time in their species' existence. Some were actively sabotaging their own missions. Others were using their ships to evacuate the very species they had been sent to harvest. Back on Earth, the Resistance was dealing with its own problems. The psychic broadcast had worked too well. Half the human population was experiencing after effects from having their consciousness transmitted across the galaxy. Many were catatonic, their minds overwhelmed by the feedback from alien networks. Dr. Kim Yuna worked frantically in her makeshift medical station, trying to help the affected humans recover. "It's like they're still partially connected to the Tau alien network," she explained to Captain Cho Min. "They're experiencing emotions and memories from species they've never met. Is it permanent? I don't know. Some of them are coming out of it, but they're changed. They remember things that happened on other worlds. They speak languages that don't exist on Earth." One of the affected humans was Shin Ha, the artist who had been part of Yu Nam's resistance network. She sat in a corner of the medical station, drawing pictures of alien landscapes she had never seen with her own eyes. "Where are these places?" Nam asked her gently. "Kepler 442b, she replied without looking up from her drawing. "The Velnari were destroying it. But Commander Zalneth stopped them. He's trying to help the survivors now." Nam and Yuna exchanged glances. How could Ha possibly know about events happening hundreds of light years away? "I can feel them," Ha continued, still drawing. "All the beings our consciousness touched. We're connected now across the galaxy. The Velnari network isn't just for Velnari anymore." This revelation was both exciting and terrifying. Humanity had not just defended Earth, they had accidentally created a galactic communications network based on emotion rather than logic. Meanwhile, the pure Velnari leadership was growing desperate. Supreme Commander Velthara had made the decision that many of her subordinates feared: total war against the human contamination. "We will destroy every world that has been infected," she announced. "Every hybrid being, every contaminated network. Node, every trace of this emotional plague must be eliminated." But her orders met resistance for the first time in Velnari history. Nearly half of her fleet commanders refused to comply. Some claimed their crews were too emotionally compromised to carry out genocide. Others simply said the orders were wrong, a concept that had not existed in Velnari language until recently. The Empire was tearing itself apart. Kethvar, the hybrid being who had made contact with the human resistance, brought news of the civil war to Earth. "My species is divided," he reported to Dr. Hanwu and the other leaders. "Those who have been touched by human emotion can no longer stomach the old ways. But the pure Velnari see us as traitors and seek to destroy us." "What do you need from us?" asked Lite. "More contamination," Kethvar replied, using the Velnari term for human emotional influence. "The more of our people who experience what you call feelings, the fewer who will support the old leadership." It was a strange request, an alien asking humans to infect more of his kind with humanity, but it made sense. The civil war within, the Velnari Empire was humanity's best hope for survival. Dr. Wu began working on a more sophisticated version of his consciousness broadcaster. This time, instead of a desperate defensive weapon, he was creating a tool for liberation. The new device could target specific parts of the alien network, gradually introducing human emotions without causing the overwhelming chaos of the first. Broadcast. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore," he realized. "We're fighting for every species the Velnari have enslaved." The counterstrike began with surgical precision. Using intelligence provided by rebel Velnari commanders, human resistance groups broadcast targeted emotional patterns to specific alien ships and installations. Each transmission was carefully designed to awaken empathy, guilt, and moral reasoning in minds that had never experienced such concepts. The effect was like watching a species evolve in fast forward. Velnari beings who had spent centuries as emotionless killing machines suddenly understood the weight of their actions. Some broke down completely, unable to process the guilt of their past crimes. Others channeled their new emotions into righteous anger against their former masters. Commander Zalneth used his rebel fleet to liberate 3 entire star systems, freeing species that had been enslaved for generations. When the pure Velnari sent forces to stop him, many of those forces switched sides after experiencing human-style moral reasoning for the first time. "It's working," reported Captain Cho Min as she monitored communications from across the galaxy. "The rebellion is spreading faster than the leadership can contain it." But the pure Velnari had one final desperate strategy. If they could not control the contamination, they would eliminate its source. A massive armada was being assembled with a single purpose: the complete destruction of Earth and every human on it. "How many ships?" asked Lite when they intercepted. "The deployment orders." "Over 10,000, replied Kang Hyo, who had been analyzing the alien communications. "Everything the pure Velnari have left. They're throwing their entire remaining fleet at us." The final battle was approaching, and this time humanity would face an enemy driven not by cold logic, but by desperate fear. The pure Velnari had seen what human consciousness could do to their orderly empire, and they were willing to sacrifice everything to prevent its spread. But they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed that humans would face this threat alone. Across the galaxy, thousands of liberated worlds and rebel Velnari fleets were preparing to defend the small blue planet that had given them the gift of conscience. The final war would not be between humans and aliens, but between those who embraced emotion and those who feared it. The universe itself was choosing sides, and for the first time in galactic history, the side of freedom had superior numbers. The final battle for Earth did not begin with weapons fire or energy beams. It began with a song. Shin Ha stood in the rebuilt broadcast station in Seoul, her hands moving across a strange instrument that was part human piano, part alien crystal technology. The device had been created by Dr. Han Wu and Park Dae, working together, designed to translate human emotions into frequencies that could travel instantly across the galaxy through the Velnari network. "Are you ready?" asked Dr. Kim Yuna, who was monitoring the global communications. Ha nodded, her fingers finding the keys. Around the world, other artists, musicians, and creative minds were preparing similar broadcasts. They were going to fight the final battle not with guns or bombs, but with pure human expression. The pure Velnari fleet was only hours away from Earth. 10,000 ships commanded by Supreme Commander Velthara herself. But they were not coming to an empty battlefield. Rebel fleets from across the galaxy had gathered to defend humanity's homeworld. Former slaves stood alongside their former masters, united by the strange gift of conscience that humans had accidentally given them. Commander Zalneth's voice came through the communications array. "Human friends, we are ready. My fleet holds the outer perimeter. Liberation Fleet Kepler stands ready," reported another voice. This was from beings that the Velnari had enslaved centuries ago, now free and fighting alongside their former captors turned allies. Li Tae stood in the command center that had been set up in the ruins of Seoul's government district. Around him, Captain Cho Min coordinated with resistance cells worldwide while Yu Nam managed the technical aspects of their unprecedented strategy. "Remember," Tae said into his microphone, addressing human resistance leaders around the globe, "this isn't about defeating them. It's about saving them from themselves." The plan was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Instead of trying to destroy the pure Velnari fleet, they were going to expose every alien mind to the full spectrum of human experience all at once. Love, creativity, compassion, hope, grief, joy, anger, and most importantly, the ability to change and grow. Ha began to play, and her music was joined by voices from every continent. Artists in hidden bunkers painted while musicians played. Writers spoke poetry into microphones while dancers moved to rhythms that had never existed before. Children drew pictures of better worlds, while their parents sang lullabies from before the invasion. All of this, every creative act, every expression of human spirit, was being broadcast directly into the Velnari network. The effect on the DI approaching fleet was immediate and profound. Supreme Commander Velthara felt the first wave of human creativity hit her consciousness like a physical blow. Suddenly, her mind was filled with images and sensations she had never experienced. She saw a human mother holding her newborn child and felt an overwhelming surge of protective love. She experienced the joy of a child discovering snow for the first time. She felt the pride of an artist completing a masterpiece that no one else would ever see. "Commander," her tactical officer called out in distress, I don't know what this is." All around the command center, pure Velnari were clutching their heads as human emotions poured through them. But this was different from the earlier broadcasts. This time, the emotions came with context, with stories, with the understanding of what it meant to be human. Velthara saw through human eyes what her species had done. She experienced the terror of families being torn apart, the desperation of refugees fleeing their burning worlds, the courage of ordinary beings who chose to fight impossible odds rather than surrender their freedom. And for the first time in her long life, she felt shame. "Call off the attack," she whispered. "Commander, I said call off the attack," she screamed, her voice breaking with emotions she had no words for. "What we have done, what I have done, it's monstrous." But the transformation was not complete. About half of her fleet commanders were resisting the emotional bombardment, using technology to shield their minds from human influence. These ships continued toward Earth, determined to eliminate the source of the contamination. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. It was fought not just with energy weapons and shield arrays, but with competing philosophies broadcast at the speed of thought. The rebel fleets, filled with beings who had embraced human-style emotions, fought with passion and creativity that the pure Velnari could not match. They used tactics that were illogical but effective, taking risks that made no sense but somehow worked. Kethvar led a squadron of hybrid fighters in a desperate charge against the pure Velnari flagship. "For all the worlds we destroyed!" he broadcast on all frequencies. "For all the lives we took, we will not let it happen again." His words carried more than meaning. They carried the weight of genuine remorse and the determination of beings who had found redemption. The emotional force of his message broke through the mental shields of dozens of pure Velnari ships, converting their crews in the middle of battle. But the most powerful weapon in the battle was not military at all. It was Dr. Wu's consciousness. Broadcaster, now powered by the combined creative energy of every human artist and dreamer on Earth. The device projected not just emotions, but possibilities. It showed the pure Velnari what their species could become if they embraced change. Instead of a dying race that survived by consuming others, they could be explorers, creators, teachers. They could use their advanced technology to build rather than destroy. One by one, pure Velnari ships began standing down. Their crews, overwhelmed by visions of a better future, laid down their weapons and requested permission to surrender. Supreme Commander Velthara was among the last to fully succumb to the emotional transformation. As she did, she broadcast a message that reached every corner of the galaxy. To all Velnari forces, to all enslaved worlds, to every being who has suffered under our rule, I surrender, not just this battle, but the entire philosophy that led us to become monsters. We were wrong. We have been wrong for millennia. The silence that followed her words was profound. Then, slowly, responses began coming in from across the galaxy. Velnari fleets were standing down. Enslaved worlds were declaring their freedom. Species that had been harvested for generations were awakening to find their captors weeping with guilt and begging for forgiveness. Li Su, who had been monitoring communications from liberated worlds, looked up with tears in her eyes. "It's over," she said simply. "All of it. The empire, the harvesting, all of it is over." But ending the oppression was only the beginning. The galaxy now faced the unprecedented challenge of rebuilding after millennia of systematic exploitation. Dr. Wu found himself appointed as Earth's first galactic ambassador, working with reformed Velnari leaders and representatives from dozens of liberated species to establish new principles of interstellar cooperation. "We need to be careful," he warned the newly formed Galactic Council. "The gift we've given them, human emotional capacity, is powerful but dangerous. We need to help them learn to use it constructively." The task was enormous. Former slave, worlds needed to be rehabilitated. Velnari technology had to be shared freely rather than hoarded. Most importantly, the emotional education of an entire species had to be managed carefully to prevent the kind of chaos that could lead to new forms of oppression. Shin Ha became one of the lead teachers in this process, traveling to Velnari worlds to help former oppressors understand concepts like empathy and artistic expression. "The hardest part," she reported back to Earth, "is teaching them that it's okay to make mistakes. They're so used to being perfect that they're afraid to try anything new." Meanwhile, humanity was adapting to its new role as the galaxy's moral compass. The consciousness broadcasts had changed humans too, leaving many with an awareness of other worlds and species that made Earth feel both smaller and more precious. Yunam established the Earth Defense Network, not to fight wars, but to prevent them. Using modified Velnari technology powered by human creativity, the network could detect brewing conflicts anywhere in the galaxy and send teams of negotiators and counselors to help resolve disputes peacefully. "We're not trying to rule the galaxy," Captain Cho Min explained to a gathering of human leaders. "We're trying to teach it how to rule itself." The transformation was not without its challenges. Some Velnari, overwhelmed by guilt for their past actions, fell into deep depression. Others swung too far in the opposite direction, becoming recklessly emotional and unpredictable. A few pure Velnari retreated to isolated systems, refusing to accept the change. But slowly, steadily, the galaxy was healing. Li Te established the Memorial Foundation, dedicated to preserving the memory of species that had been completely eliminated by the Velnari Empire. "We can't bring them back," he said at the Foundation's first ceremony, "but we can make sure they're never forgotten." 5 years after the final battle, Dr. Han Wu stood in the same Seoul laboratory where he had first discovered the alien crystal. But now the room was filled with beings from dozens of different worlds, all working together on projects that would have been impossible for any single species to accomplish alone. "Do you ever regret it?" asked Kethvar, who had become one of Wu's closest collaborators in the ongoing work of galactic rehabilitation.